Hey class, I apologize for being out today, but I have a meeting, so it's one of the last, I think, of two I have this year. So I'll be back in the class pretty much for the rest of the year. So we're starting a new unit today, and unfortunately I can't be here for it, but you should have received already the poetry packet for this unit, and what you're seeing on the first 2 pages is 15 vocab terms that are associated with poetry. For every other unit we've had this year, I've had maybe 4 to 6 terms that you need to know for author's craft. There's a lot more for poetry that you need to know. And, I would love to be able to just look at music videos and analyze the lyrics and not have to talk about any of this stuff. But, you're going to be using these terms for the rest of high school and beyond. So I kind of have to teach them to you. So we're going to have to take some notes on these terms while I'm talking about each term. Rather than do a gallery walk where I hang these, I print them out and I hang them in the hallways and you just write them down. I want to talk to you about each term because you're going to see that verbally I can explain to you what the terms mean maybe a little better than they're described in writing. So for those of you who are audible listeners, I want you to have both the visual and audio to kind of process what these terms mean. And hopefully you'll leave with a better understanding of all of them. So if you look at the first term I have on the screen here, it's actually number 11 on the second page of your packet. So we're going to start there with creating sound. So all of these terms, 11 through 15, have to do with not the way that words are spelled, but how they sound when we say them. And in poetry, that really matters. So alliteration, which is the first term you see here, is one that will pop up in English classes all of the time, not just with poetry, but in regular prose writing as well. So alliteration, and you should be taking notes from what you see on the screen here and what I'm saying and on number 11. So technically, it's a stylistic device in which a number of words having the same first consonant sound occur close together in a series, and it doesn't depend on the letters, but on the sounds. So, for example, Carrie's cat clawed her couch, creating chaos. Can you hear the repetition of the ka, 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 ka? That's called alliteration. Okay, so when you have a group of words that start with the same sound, if you're looking for a way to shorten up this definition, a group of words that start with the same sound, okay? Likewise, the second example, Dan's dog dove deep in the dam, drinking dirty water as he dove. Da 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 da, right? So that's anytime there's that repetition in the beginning of words, that repetition of sound, it's called alliteration. Okay, whenever she sells seashells by the seashore, or Peter Piper picked a pickled pepper, or however that saying goes, that's also alliterative. So that's a technique that poets use to have an effect on the reader when they're reading it and they're like, oh, okay, this has a certain sound. Okay, if you're not done and ready to move on, the nice thing is about video, you can pause it. Okay, so if you still need to write about alliteration, pause it now. Otherwise, I'm moving on here. Second term on there, number 12, is kind of fun to say. You know why, because it's called assonance. What a funny word. Whereas alliteration focuses on the repetition of sound at the beginning of a word, this focuses on the repetition of vowel sounds placed in a word. So most words don't start with vowels. They start with what we call consonants, everything besides vowels. But when you have the repetition of vowel sounds in a series of words, that's called assonance. So for example, we light fire on the mountain. So those underlined words, the I, the repetition of that vowel sound, okay, is an example of assonance. I feel depressed and restless. Okay, the Johnny went here and there and everywhere. The engineer held the steering to steer the vehicle. E. So there's the repetition of that vowel sound. Okay, so it has to do with sound, not spelling. Okay, I'm moving on. Pause it if you need to. Third up, oh, I got rid of that one. Bye. Number 13. Rhyme. You've heard this before. You've been hearing rhymes since you were a little kid with nursery rhymes. So it's basically when the ending of something sounds alike. So for instance, time, slime, mime. We use this in music and we use it when we're learning how to make sounds as little kids to kind of help us remember. So rhyming, it's really easy. It provides this kind of cadence and we just remember it better when something rhymes. So that's why a lot of, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, How I Wonder What You Are, those rhyme and you remember those really easily. There's also, and you don't necessarily need to write this down, but if words have double rhyme at the end, that means that the last two syllables rhyme together. So revival, arrival, survival. And triple rhyme, the last three syllables rhyme. So greenery, machinery, scenery. And even though those words are spelled differently, they all make the same sound. So it's still considered rhyme. Next up. Rhythm. We all know about this because we all love music, right? Music has rhythm. Poetry, much in the same way, just like lyrics to songs are kind of just like poetry that we sing. Poems have rhythm. So anything that's not written in free verse, which free verse means there's no rules. Okay, sorry, my a teacher walked in and I got interrupted here. So we're going to continue. Rhythm is basically anything that's not written in free verse. So free verse refers to poetry that has no rules. Will have rhythm or a beat. So on your notes, I would write rhythm equals beat equals meter, because those are all terms that are synonymous with each other. So basically, each syllable in a line of poetry has a certain, there's a purpose there. Okay, so there's a rhythm there that the author's trying to keep. So this is a weird example, but the letters on the example there that are lowercase are not stressed, and the ones that are in uppercase are. So I thought I saw a pussy cat, right? Twinkle, twinkle, little star. So that has a rhythm to it, okay? So that's what we're referring to when we talk about rhythm. Okay, we are in the next phase here, which is for form. You're going to be going to number one. Number one is line. And so this is the way that poetry is structured, the terms that we refer to poetry as in terms of its structure. So a line of poetry refers to a group of words arranged into a row that ends for a reason other than the right-hand margin. So if you have ever seen poetry before, which I hope you have, it looks way different, right, than a book of literature. So when you're writing a paper or you're reading a book, the only reason that one line ends and the next begins is because you run out of room, right? You go all the way from left to right on the page and then, oops, okay, I ran out of room. So your computer, if you're writing an essay, automatically goes to the next line. But with poetry, you end the line where you want to end it for a reason. So either, and there are more reasons that are listed here, but the author found that the number of syllables they had, like if they wanted to keep their rhythm, oh, okay, I've got enough syllables there, I need to go to the next line if I want to keep my rhythm. Or maybe it's because the stresses, there was enough stresses there, so I need to go to the next line. Or maybe it's because you wanted your rhyme, your end line to rhyme. So there are lots of reasons, but for whatever the reason, the poet gets to decide when they want a line to end. It is not because they reach the end of the road. They decide what sounds best and what makes the most impact. Stanza, number two, means basically, it's like the paragraph of poetry. So if you've ever seen poems, and you can kind of sift through the poems that we have in our packet here if you've never seen a poem before. But a lot of times you'll see there's a group of lines, and then there's a break. There's like a space, and then there's another group of lines, and then the space. So those groupings of lines are called stanzas, and it's basically the paragraphs of a poem. And usually, if there are multiple stanzas within a poem, you'll see a repetition of the same pattern, rhyme scheme throughout the poem. Okay, which, as I just mentioned. Number three, rhyme scheme. It's the pattern established by the arrangement of rhymes in a stanza or poem. So for instance, Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. That's my go-to right now. Star and are what those lines end with. Those two words rhyme. So we would refer to that first grouping of rhyming as AA. And then up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. High and sky rhyme. So that's our second pair of rhymes. So that would be BB. So Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star has an AABB and so on rhyme scheme. For example, Shakespeare in his sonnets, he has every other line kind of rhyming. So different poems have different kind of purposeful rhyme schemes. Okay. Form. Number 4. So this is basically the characteristics, the structure of a particular poem. And so if I were to ask you to write a haiku, which you may or may not have done with other teachers, there's a very specific structure that you have to follow in order for your poem to be called a haiku. You have to have 3 lines. It's 5 syllables on the first line, 7 syllables on the second line, 5 syllables on the third line. So that's a really kind of structured form for it to be considered haiku. The same goes for other forms that you see here, limerick and sonnet. We consider form to be either open or closed, okay? Free verse poetry, open means basically there's no rules. You don't have to follow a rhyme scheme. You don't have to have a certain amount of syllables in a line or anything. So open form just basically means there's no rules. And closed form, this is the case with haiku and limerick and sonnet. It's a closed form, meaning you have to have a certain structure in order for it to be called a haiku, limerick, sonnet, whatever. Okay, we're moving on. We're getting close. We're now in creating meaning with words. So this is number 5. And this refers, this section, the creating meaning with words 5 through 10, refers to the way poets can create meaning for us. So an allegory, what this blob means here at the top is basically the author tells us a story with characters, with a narrative, but the story is kind of a symbol for something bigger. So allegory and symbolism are very similar in their meaning. A lot of times, if you've ever been to any kind of church as a little kid, any kind of church, usually the kids go somewhere else, right, while the parents stay in one place, and they'll tell you stories, but those stories have deeper meanings, right? If we think about fairy tales that we're told as kids, or things like Hansel and Gretel, right? So these 2 kids go into the forest and they take candy from a stranger, and then they are almost eaten by that stranger, right? So stranger danger is the moral of the story. Even though we have a whole story there, really the point was to warn us about something when we're little. So that's allegory. Allusion is a brief and indirect reference to a person, place, thing, or idea that has historical, cultural, literary, or political importance. So if you allude to, wow, that guy's a real Einstein, right? So I'm referring to him as like Albert Einstein, but I just assume you know who Einstein is, and I assume you know that I mean he's really smart, or if I say it sarcastically, that he's really dumb. So I kind of refer to something that I assume you have the knowledge of already. So for example, don't act like a Romeo in front of her. Romeo, right, one of the most romantic characters in literature. This place is like a Garden of Eden. So Garden of Eden refers to a story in the Bible that most people in Western culture know about, and it would mean that that place is really lush and looks like a really pretty place to be. Connotation. This one is important. This is one of those words when I learned connotation and denotation, I felt really smart. Connotation is the feelings we get from a word. So words or feelings we associate with a word. So if I were to say to laugh, right? So this very kind of bland verb, that's pretty general. There are lots of different kinds of laughs. But if I were to say to cackle,